Jake Miller had never felt so small in his entire life. He stood at the back of the tour group, trying to make himself invisible. It was not easy. He was the only human on the entire ship. Every alien in the group kept looking back at him like he was some kind of dangerous animal that might attack at any moment. The spaceship was called the UGC Sentinel. It was the biggest warship in the United Galactic Coalition fleet. Jake had seen pictures of it before he came aboard. The pictures did not prepare him for the real thing. The hallways were so wide that 10 humans could walk side by side. The ceilings were so high that Jake felt like an ant, walking through a giant's house. Ambassador Thelvin was leading the tour. He was a Veltari, one of the oldest species in the Coalition. His body was covered in scales that changed color depending on his mood. Right now, they were a calm blue-green. He stood almost 8 feet tall and had to bend down slightly when walking through some doorways. "Welcome to the Sentinel," Thelvin said. His voice made clicking sounds, but a small device on his chest translated everything into English for Jake. "This ship represents the greatest achievement of Coalition engineering. It has served our fleet for over 200 years. The other aliens in the tour group nodded with respect. There were about 20 of them. Jake tried to remember all the species names he had learned during his training on Earth. The tall ones with 4 arms were Marathi. Their skin looked like black glass, smooth and shiny. They were known as the strongest species in the Coalition. One Marathi could lift a small vehicle without trying hard. The small ones covered in soft gray fur were Finari. They only came up to Jake's chest, but they were incredibly fast. Their large ears could hear sounds from miles away. They were often used as scouts and spies. There were also Veltharians like the Ambassador, plus several other species Jake could not name. They all had one thing in common. They were all afraid of him. Jake understood why. 6 months ago, Earth had joined the United Galactic Coalition. It was the first time humans had made contact with alien life. Everyone on Earth had celebrated. They thought joining the Coalition meant humanity had finally proven itself worthy of the stars, but the aliens did not see it that way. To them, Earth was a death world. That was the official term. A death world was a planet so dangerous that most species could not survive on it. Earth had everything that aliens feared. Extreme temperatures, dangerous animals, poisonous plants, natural disasters, diseases that could kill in days. And humans had not just survived on this death world. They had thrived. They had built cities and nations. They had developed technology and art and culture. They had done all of this while living on a planet that should have killed them 1,000 times over. This made humans terrifying to the rest of the galaxy. Captain Zilrek walked beside Jake. He was also a Velthari, but younger than the Ambassador. His scales were a darker shade of blue. He had been assigned to watch Jake during the tour, or maybe to protect the other aliens from Jake. Jake was not sure which. "You are very quiet, Private Miller," Captain Zilrek said. Jake shrugged. "Just trying to learn, sir. You do not wish to ask questions?" "I have learned that my questions make people nervous." Captain Zilrek made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You are more observant than most humans I have met." "How many humans have you met, sir?" "Including you?" 3. Jake nodded. Humans were still rare in the Coalition. Most species did not want them on their ships or their planets. The Sentinel was one of the few vessels willing to accept a human crew member. And even then, Jake was only allowed because the Coalition Council had ordered it. They called it an integration program. Jake called it being a guinea pig. The tour continued through the ship. They saw the engine room, where massive generators powered everything. They saw the medical bay, which had equipment for treating over 100 different species. They saw the recreation areas, where aliens played games and exercised and relaxed. Everywhere they went, Crew members stopped to stare at Jake. Some whispered to each other. Others simply moved out of his way, pressing themselves against the walls, as if touching him might be dangerous. Jake pretended not to notice. He had gotten used to this treatment over the past few weeks. It still hurt, but he did not let it show. "The next stop on our tour is the armory," Ambassador Thelvin announced. His scales flickered with excitement. "This is where we keep our most prized weapons. Some of the items here are worth more than entire planets." The group moved forward with eager steps. Even the nervous Fenari seemed excited. Weapons were apparently a big deal in Coalition culture. Every species had their own martial traditions and famous warriors. Jake followed at the back. He was not particularly interested in weapons. Back on Earth, he had been training to be a chef. He had joined the space program because it offered free education and a chance to see the stars. He had never expected to end up on a warship, but orders were orders. The Coalition wanted humans integrated into their military forces. Jake had been one of the volunteers. His job on the Sentinel was simple. He helped in the kitchen. He cleaned dishes and prepared food and learned how to cook for alien species. It was not glamorous, but it was honest work. The armory doors appeared at the end of the hallway. They were thick and heavy, made of some metal Jake did not recognize. Security panels lined both sides. Ambassador Thelvin placed his hand on one panel, and a beam of light scanned his scales. "Identity confirmed," a computer voice said. "Welcome, Ambassador." The doors began to open with a deep rumbling sound. Bright light spilled out from inside. The aliens in the group pressed forward, eager to see what treasures waited within. Jake took a deep breath and followed them inside. He had no idea that the next few minutes would change everything. Not just for him, not just for the aliens on this ship, but for the entire galaxy, all because of 3 simple knives. The armory was the most impressive room Jake had seen on the entire ship. It was huge. The ceiling stretched up so high that Jake could barely see it. Bright white lights hung from above, making everything shine and sparkle. The walls were lined with glass cases, and inside each case was a weapon. There were thousands of them. Guns that glowed with strange energy. Swords with blades that seemed to shift and move like liquid. Hammers so large that Jake wondered how anyone could lift them. Shields covered in symbols and patterns. Armor that looked like it belonged in a museum. The aliens spread out across the room, their eyes wide with wonder. Even the serious Moradi commander seemed impressed. His forearms gestured at various displays while he talked with his companions in a language Jake could not understand. Ambassador Thelvin moved to the center of the room. His scales had turned a bright gold color, showing his pride. "Everything you see here has a story," he said. "These weapons have been collected over thousands of years. They represent the greatest achievements of Coalition military technology. Some were carried by legendary warriors. Others were made by master craftsmen who spent their entire lives perfecting their art." Jake walked slowly along the walls, looking at each display. He did not touch anything. Signs everywhere warned visitors to keep their hands away from the glass. Some weapons were apparently still active and could be dangerous. One case held a long rifle with a glowing blue core. The sign said it was a plasma disruptor, capable of melting through solid steel. Another case held a pair of gloves covered in tiny metal plates. According to the sign, the gloves could generate force fields strong enough to stop a spaceship. It was all very impressive. But Jake did not feel the same excitement as the aliens. To him, these were tools of war. They were designed to hurt and kill. He had seen enough violence on Earth to know that weapons were not something to celebrate. He kept these thoughts to himself. He was a guest here. It was not his place to criticize. The tour group gathered near the front of the room, where Ambassador Thelvin stood before a special display case. This case was different from the others. It sat on a raised platform and was surrounded by extra security barriers. Red lights blinked around its edges, warning people to stay back. And now, Ambassador Thelvin said, his voice dropping to a serious tone, "I present to you the crown jewels of our collection, the legendary Solari blades." The aliens gasped. Several of them pressed their hands together in gestures of respect. The Fenari ambassador actually dropped to one knee, bowing his furry head. Jake moved closer to see what all the fuss was about. Inside the case were 3 blades. They rested on cushions of dark velvet, arranged in order of size. The largest was about 18 inches long, with a curved edge and a thick spine. The middle one was slender and straight, maybe 12 inches, with 2 sharp edges. The smallest was only about 6 inches, with tiny teeth along one side. They were beautiful, Jake had to admit. The metal had a strange shimmer to it, like starlight trapped in steel. The handles were wrapped in some kind of leather and decorated with small gems, but something about them seemed familiar. Commander Brix, the Marathi leader, stepped forward with all 4 arms raised in respect. His voice was deep and rough when he spoke. "The Solari blades," he said. "I have heard stories about these since I was a child. They were forged in the zero-gravity zones near a neutron star. The metal comes from the heart of dead stars. It took 3 generations of master smiths to complete them." Ambassador Thelvin nodded. "Each blade is valued at more than most planetary defense budgets. They are among the deadliest close combat weapons ever created. A single cut from the largest blade can slice through powered armor like paper." The Fenari ambassador was still on his knee. His large ears trembled as he spoke. "I have seen recordings of these blades in battle. The warrior who carried them killed 50 enemies in a single engagement. It was terrifying to watch." All the aliens murmured in agreement. They stared at the blades with a mixture of fear and admiration. These were not just weapons to them. They were sacred objects. Symbols of power and death. Jake tilted his head and looked closer at the blades. The more he looked, the more familiar they seemed. The curved blade with the thick spine. The straight blade with 2 edges. The small blade with the serrated edge. He had seen shapes like these before. Many times. Every day, in fact. A strange feeling grew in his stomach. It was the feeling he got when he was about to say something he probably should not say. He tried to keep his mouth shut. He really did. But the words came out anyway. "Those are kitchen knives on my planet," he murmured. He said it quietly, almost to himself. But the armory had perfect acoustics. Every word carried clearly across the room. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Jake had ever heard. Every alien in the room turned to look at him. Ambassador Thelvin's scales went from gold to white in an instant. Commander Brix's 4 arms froze in mid-gesture. The Fenari ambassador slowly rose from his knee, his large eyes fixed on Jake with an expression of pure disbelief. Captain Zilrek made a choking sound beside Jake. "I'm sorry," he said carefully. "Could you repeat that, Private Miller?" Jake swallowed hard. He realized he had made a mistake. A big one. But there was no taking the words back now. "I said, those look like kitchen knives. The kind we use on Earth." He pointed at each blade in turn. "That curved one is like a cleaver, for chopping meat. The straight one is like a chef's knife, for cutting vegetables and stuff. And that little one is a paring knife, for peeling fruit." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the security systems around the display case. Jake wished the floor would open up and swallow him whole. The silence in the armory lasted for what felt like hours. In reality, it was probably only a few seconds. But those seconds stretched out like taffy, long and uncomfortable. Ambassador Thelvin was the first to recover. His scales flickered through several colors before settling on a pale gray. Jake had learned enough about Velthri body language to know that gray meant shock. Deep, profound shock. "Private Miller," the ambassador said slowly. "Perhaps there has been a translation error. Our devices sometimes struggle with human languages. You cannot possibly mean what I think you said." Jake scratched the back of his neck. He did that when he was nervous. Right now, he was very nervous. "There's no error, sir. Those blades look exactly like the ones in my grandmother's kitchen. She uses the big curved one to cut up pork and chicken. The straight one is for chopping vegetables. The little one is for detailed work, like peeling apples or cleaning shrimp." Commander Brix stepped toward Jake. The Marathi was huge, almost 7 feet tall and nearly as wide. His forearms hung at his sides, fingers twitching slightly. "You are saying," he said in his deep voice, "that your species uses weapons of mass destruction to prepare food. They're not weapons of mass destruction. They're just knives. Every kitchen on Earth has them. You can buy them at any store. Some of them cost less than $10. The room erupted into chaos. Several Fenari collapsed against each other, their furs standing straight up in panic. A group of Velthri began arguing loudly, their scales flashing through dozens of colors. Commander Brix stumbled backward and had to catch himself on a display case. Captain Zilrek grabbed Jake's arm. "Perhaps we should leave," he suggested urgently. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," Jake said. "I was just stating a fact. Your facts are causing several diplomats to have cardiac events." Ambassador Thelvin raised his hands for silence. It took several minutes for the room to calm down. When it finally did, he turned to face Jake with an expression of forced calm. Let us approach this logically," he said. "These Solari blades are made from neutron star alloys. The metal is one of the hardest substances in the known universe. Surely your Earth knives are made from something inferior?" Jake shook his head. "We use regular steel, sometimes stainless steel. Some fancy ones are made from ceramic. But yeah, just normal materials. And these normal materials can match the cutting power of neutron star alloys." Jake thought about it. "I mean, I don't know about cutting through armor or anything, but a good chef's knife can slice through bone if you sharpen it right. My grandmother's cleaver can cut through a whole pig." A Fenari fainted. His companions caught him before he hit the floor. Commander Brix was breathing heavily. His obsidian skin had developed a slight sheen of sweat. How many of these kitchen weapons does a typical human dwelling contain?" "Weapons is the wrong word," Jake said patiently. "They're tools. But to answer your question, most kitchens have at least 5 or 6 knives. Some have more. My mother has a whole block of them. Maybe 12 or 15. 15 blade weapons in a single dwelling," Commander Brix whispered. "And these are available to all humans?" Ambassador Thelvin asked. "Without restriction?" "Yeah, anyone can buy them. Kids learn to use them around age 10 or 11. Maybe younger, depending on the family. My mom taught me knife skills when I was 8. Captain Zilrek's S-grip on Jake's arm tightened. "You give these weapons to children?" Jake finally pulled his arm free. He was starting to get annoyed. "Look, I keep telling you, they're not weapons. They're kitchen tools. We use them to cook food. Cooking is something we do every day. Multiple times a day, actually. You can't cook without knives. Our species uses molecular disassemblers to prepare food," Ambassador Thelvin said faintly. "Machines that break down organic matter into basic components. There is no cutting involved. Wow, humans like to cook by hand. It's part of our culture. Some people consider it an art form. My grandmother's cooking is famous in our whole neighborhood. She's been using those knives for 50 years. 50 years, Commander Brix repeated. Your elderly population handles blade weapons for half a century? Again, not weapons. But yes, my grandmother is 73, and she still cooks every day. She's faster with a knife than I am. She can chop an onion in like 5 seconds. The room had gone quiet again. But this was a different kind of quiet. Before, it had been the silence of shock. Now, it was the silence of fear. Jake looked around at the aliens. They were all staring at him with wide eyes. Some were trembling. The Funari who had fainted was being carried toward the door by his companions. Ambassador Thelvin had gone completely still, his scales a solid white. Your grandmother, Captain Zilrex said slowly, can use a blade with precision and speed at the age of 73? She's not the only one. Lots of old people cook. It keeps them active and healthy. And humans do this. For pleasure? Sure, cooking is relaxing. It's creative. Plus, you get to eat good food at the end. What's not to like? Commander Brix walked to the display case and stared at the Solari blades. His forearms were folded across his chest. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. These blades were carried by Warlord Solaris herself. She conquered 7 star systems. She was considered the deadliest warrior in Coalition history. He turned to look at Jake. And you are telling me that human grandmothers use similar implements to chop vegetables? Jake nodded. Pretty much, yeah. Commander Brix closed his eyes. I need to sit down. Ambassador Thelvin moved to a nearby wall panel and pressed several buttons. I am calling an emergency meeting, he announced. The Coalition Council needs to hear about this immediately. Jake felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. Is that really necessary? I just mentioned some kitchen knives. Private Miller, Ambassador Thelvin said, turning to face him with scales that had shifted to a deep, serious purple. You have just revealed that your species casually handles weapons that match our most legendary blades. You give these weapons to children. Your elderly use them daily. This is not just about kitchen implements. He paused, his eyes meeting Jake's. This is about everything we thought we knew about humans. And I fear we knew nothing at all. The conference room was cold and bright. Jake sat at one end of a long metal table. On the other end sat 5 of the most important beings in the Coalition military. Admiral Vexari was in charge. She was the oldest Velthari Jake had ever seen. Her scales had faded to a pale silver with age, but her eyes were sharp and alert. She commanded the entire Coalition defense fleet. When she spoke, everyone listened. Beside her sat General Throm, a Moradi warrior so decorated that his uniform could barely contain all his medals. His forearms rested on the table, fingers interlaced. He had not spoken a word since the meeting began. There were also 2 scientists from the Coalition Research Division and a diplomat from the Integration Council. All of them stared at Jake like he was a bomb that might explode at any moment. Holographic recorders floated around the room, capturing everything from multiple angles. Jake had been told that this meeting was being broadcast to every Coalition world. Billions of beings were watching him right now. He tried not to think about that. Let us begin at the beginning, Admiral Vexari said. Her voice was calm and controlled. Private Miller, please confirm for the record. On your planet, bladed implements similar to the Solari blades are common household items? Jake nodded. Yes, ma'am. Every kitchen has knives. They're used for preparing food. And these knives are available to all citizens without restriction? You can buy them at grocery stores, hardware stores, online shops. They're everywhere. Admiral Vexari made a note on her datapad. What other bladed implements do humans keep in their homes? Jake thought about it. This was a dangerous question. He had already caused a panic by mentioning kitchen knives. But lying to a military tribunal did not seem like a good idea either. "Well, there are scissors," he said carefully, "for cutting paper and fabric. Razors for shaving. Box cutters for opening packages. Garden shears for trimming plants." The scientists muttered to each other and took notes. "What about larger tools?" Admiral Vexari asked. Jake hesitated. "We have axes for chopping wood." "Axes?" General Throm spoke for the first time. His voice was like thunder. "War axes?" "No, just regular axes. For cutting down trees and splitting firewood. Lots of people have them, especially in rural areas." General Throm's 4 hands gripped the edge of the table. The metal dented slightly under his strength. "What else?" Admiral Vexari pressed. Jake swallowed. "Chainsaws?" The room went silent. Admiral Vexari's scales flickered. "Define chainsaw, please." "It's a power tool for cutting wood. It has a motor that makes a chain of small blades spin really fast. You can cut through a tree trunk in minutes." One of the scientists dropped his datapad. The other looked like he might be sick. "You have motorized blade weapons available to civilians?" Admiral Vexari asked slowly. "They're not weapons. They're for yard work. Cutting down trees. Trimming branches. That kind of thing. And anyone can purchase these?" "Yeah, you can buy them at most hardware stores. My uncle has 3 of them." General Throm stood up abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor with a terrible sound. He walked to the window and stared out at the stars, his massive back turned to the room. Admiral Vexari continued. "Let us move beyond implements. What substances do humans regularly consume?" Jake was confused by the question. "You mean food?" "I mean chemicals, compounds, things that other species might consider dangerous." Jake thought about his breakfast that morning. "I had coffee this morning, and some toast with pepper on my eggs." The diplomat leaned forward. "Coffee is made from caffeine, correct?" "Yeah, caffeine is the main ingredient. It wakes you up." "Caffeine is a restricted stimulant in the coalition," the diplomat said. "It is considered too dangerous for regular consumption. Overdose can cause cardiac failure in most species." Jake blinked. "Really? Humans drink it every day. Multiple cups sometimes. I know people who can't function without their morning coffee." The scientists were writing frantically now. "And pepper?" Admiral Vexari asked. "Black pepper?" "It's a spice. Makes food taste better. Our records indicate that pepper contains a compound called piperine. In concentrated doses, it can be used as a chemical irritant." Jake shrugged. "I mean, if you inhale a bunch of pepper, it makes you sneeze. But we put it on our food all the time. Eggs, steak, soup, salads. Pretty much everything." Admiral Vexari made more notes. "What about capsaicin?" Jake actually laughed at that one. "You mean hot peppers?" "Yeah, we love those. Some people eat peppers so hot they make your eyes water and your nose run. There are competitions for it." "Competitions?" General Throm said from the window. "Your species competes to consume chemical weapons." "They're not chemical weapons. They're vegetables. Really spicy vegetables, but still just vegetables." The meeting continued for hours. Jake answered question after question. Each answer seemed to make the aliens more and more uncomfortable. He told them about alcohol and how humans drank fermented beverages for fun. The scientists informed him that alcohol was classified as a disinfectant solvent in most coalition databases. He told them about swimming and how humans like to immerse themselves in liquid water. Several species in the coalition could die from extended water contact. He told them about running marathons, climbing mountains, and skydiving. The concept of deliberately putting oneself in dangerous situations for Enjoyment seemed to break something in General Thraum's mind, but the worst moment came near the end of the meeting. "One final question," Admiral Vexari said. "Our records indicate that humans have traveled to your planet's moon. Is this correct?" Jake nodded proudly. "Yes, ma'am. We first landed on the moon in 1969. We've been back several times since then. How did you accomplish this?" "Your planet's technology at that time was quite primitive by Coalition standards." Jake smiled, remembering the old videos he had seen in school. "We strapped ourselves to a giant rocket. Basically, a controlled explosion. The force of the explosion pushed us into space." The room went completely still. Admiral Vexari's scales had gone pure white. General Thraum turned the window, his obsidian face frozen in disbelief. The scientists had stopped writing. The diplomat had covered his face with his hands. "You wrote an explosion," Admiral Vexari said flatly. "A controlled explosion, yes. Multiple stages. Very loud. Pretty dangerous, actually. A few missions had accidents. But we kept trying until we got it right." Admiral Vexari set down her datapad. "I think we need to take a break." The meeting was adjourned. But Jake could see it in their eyes. Something had changed. The way they looked at him was different now. Before, they had been afraid of humans because of stories and statistics. Abstract ideas about death worlds and dangerous environments. Now, they were afraid of humans because they had talked to one. They had heard Jake describe his normal, everyday life. And that normal life was more terrifying than anything they had. Imagine. Jake sat alone in the conference room and wondered what was going to happen next. 3 days passed after the investigation. 3 days of silence. Jake was confined to his quarters on the Sentinel. Nobody visited him. Nobody called. He ate his meals alone and stared at the stars. Through his small window, he thought about his family back on Earth. His mother, his grandmother, his little sister who was just starting college. Would he ever see them again? Had he ruined everything by talking about kitchen knives? On the morning of the 4th day, Captain Zilrek appeared at his door. "Get dressed, Private Miller. The Coalition Assembly wants to see you." Jake's heart sank. "Am I in trouble?" Captain Zilrek's Selresh flickered through several colors before settling on a strange shade of orange. Jake had never seen that color before. He did not know what it meant. "I honestly do not know," the captain said. "But the entire assembly has gathered. All 700 species. They want to hear from you directly." The trip to the assembly hall took 2 hours by shuttle. Jake spent most of it staring out the window, watching stars drift past. Captain Zilrek sat beside him but did not speak. The assembly hall was on a space station at the center of Coalition territory. It was the largest structure Jake had ever seen. The station was shaped like a giant ring, spinning slowly in space. Ships of every size and design surrounded it, from tiny personal shuttles to massive warships. Jake was escorted through long corridors filled with aliens. All of them stopped to stare at him. Some moved aside quickly, as if afraid to get too close. Others watched with curiosity or suspicion. Finally, they reached the main chamber. It was enormous. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above. Rows of seats curved around a central platform, rising up like a stadium. Every seat was filled. 700 species. Thousands of individual representatives. All of them watching as Jake was led to the platform in the center. Holographic displays floated around the room, translating his every movement into hundreds of languages. Millions of beings across the galaxy were watching this moment. Jake stood at the podium and looked out at the sea of alien faces. He saw Velthari and Moradi and Fanari. He saw a species he could not name, with bodies of every shape and size. Some had wings. Some had tentacles. Some looked like plants or rocks or pure energy. All of them were afraid of him. Jake took a deep breath. He had been given no instructions, no script. They just wanted him to talk. To explain. So he did. I know you're scared of us, he began. His voice echoed through the massive chamber. I've seen the way you look at humans. Like we're monsters. Like we're weapons waiting to go off. The chamber was silent. Thousands of eyes watched him without blinking. And maybe, from your perspective, that makes sense. Earth is dangerous. We grew up on a planet that would kill most of you in minutes. We developed tools and skills to survive things you can't imagine. We eat chemicals you consider poison. We swim in liquids you consider deadly. We strapped ourselves to explosions just to touch the stars. Jake paused and let his words settle. But here's what you're missing. Everything we developed, every knife and axe and chainsaw, we built to make things. To create, to feed our families and build our homes. When my grandmother picks up her cleaver, she's not thinking about hurting anyone. She's thinking about the meal she's going to make, the family she's going to feed, the smile on her grandchildren's faces when they taste her cooking. He thought about his grandmother then, her small kitchen, the smell of garlic and ginger, the sound of her knife hitting the cutting board in a steady rhythm. You see our knives and think of weapons. We see them and think of dinner with the people we love. You see our endurance and think of war machines. We see runners who train for years just to prove that humans can push past their limits. You see our planet and think of death. We see it and think of home. Jake straightened his back and looked directly at the front row where Admiral Vexari and the Coalition Council sat. Humans aren't scary because we're built for violence. We're scary because we're built to survive. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day, and we didn't just survive. We thrived. We built art and music and cities. We invented machines and medicine and spaceships. We looked up at the stars and said, we want to go there. His voice grew stronger. And when we finally got here, when we finally met other beings in the universe, we didn't come looking for enemies. We came looking for friends. We came because we were alone for so long. Millions of years on our little planet, thinking we were the only ones in the universe. We came because we were lonely. Jake fell silent. He had said everything he wanted to say. Now it was up to them. The chamber remained quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, Ambassador Thelvin rose from his seat. His scales had shifted to a warm golden color. The human speaks of kitchen tools and Christmas gifts, he said. Of running races and climbing mountains. Of grandmothers who cook with legendary blades and families who gather for meals. He paused. Perhaps we have misjudged them. Captain Zilrex stood as well. Any species that looks at a blade and sees a tool for feeding their family is not a species to fear. It is a species to understand. One by one, other delegates rose. General Throm, the massive Marathi warrior, got to his feet with a sound like thunder. His deep voice filled the chamber. I have fought many battles. I have faced many enemies. But I have never met a species that rides explosions for the joy of touching their moon. This is not the behavior of monsters. This is the behavior of dreamers. More delegates stood. Velthari, Venari, species Jake could not name. Hundreds of them. Thousands of them. The sound of their movement filled the chamber like the rustling of leaves in a great forest. The Venari, ambassador who had fainted in the armory, was standing now. His large ears trembled as he spoke. My people are small and afraid. We have always hidden from danger. But the humans do not hide. They face danger and turn it into opportunity. They take their fear and transform it into courage. Perhaps we can learn from them. More voices joined in. Each speaker added something new. Some praised human creativity. Others admired human determination. A few admitted that they had been wrong to judge humans so harshly. By the end, almost every delegate in the chamber was standing. 700 species, thousands of individuals, all of them on their feet, acknowledging the strange, terrifying, wonderful creatures from the death world called Earth. Admiral Veshari was the last to rise. Her silver scales caught the light as she spoke. When humans first joined the coalition, many of us opposed it. We feared what they might do. We feared what they might become. But today, I understand something I did not understand before. The humans are not a threat to be contained. They are a gift to be welcomed. She turned to face Jake directly. Private Jake Miller, on behalf of the United Galactic Coalition, I extend our friendship. May humans and aliens walk together among the stars. May we learn from each other. And may we never forget that a kitchen knife, in the right hands, is a tool for bringing joy. Jake felt tears forming in his eyes. He had come to this meeting expecting judgment, expecting fear, expecting rejection. Instead, he had found acceptance. He thought about his grandmother again. If she could see him now, standing before the entire galaxy, she would probably tell him to stand up straight and stop crying. And then she would go back to her kitchen and chop vegetables with her legendary blades. Jake smiled. Humanity had found its place among the stars, and it all started with 3 simple kitchen knives.